What started as a routine promotional interview turned into television's most explosive confrontation when Jason Momoa walked off Stephen Colbert's show after the host ambushed him with accusations about his environmental activism and political stances, leaving audiences stunned and the internet in chaos. The Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as audience members filed into their seats, expecting nothing more than another charming celebrity interview. Jason Momoa had arrived to promote his latest blockbuster, an epic action film with a strong environmental message about protecting the oceans. The film had been earning critical acclaim and generating significant buzz, making this appearance a crucial stop on his promotional tour. Behind the scenes, however, tension was already brewing. Sources close to the production revealed that Colbert's writing team had spent the afternoon crafting what they called gotcha questions, designed to corner Momoa about his outspoken climate activism and a few recent political endorsements. The host, emboldened by his audience's political leanings, had reportedly told his producers he wanted to challenge the narrative that Momoa had been spinning in other interviews. As the show's familiar opening theme played and Colbert delivered his monologue, nothing seemed amiss. The audience laughed at his political jokes, applauded at the right moments, and settled in for what they assumed would be another entertaining hour of late-night television. But backstage, Momoa's publicist was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the line of questioning she'd overheard the host rehearsing. When Colbert finally introduced his guest, the applause was thunderous. Momoa walked out with his characteristic powerful presence and a wide, friendly smile, offering a hearty handshake to the host and taking his seat. The first few minutes proceeded exactly as expected. Light banter about the new film, some gentle ribbing about Momoa's legendary fitness regimen, and the kind of easy chemistry that made for good television. "So Jason," Colbert began, leaning back in his chair, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "This new film deals with some heavy themes about protecting our planet. Given your own well-known activism, I'm curious about how your personal beliefs influenced your approach to this story." Momoa nodded, his posture relaxed but alert. "Well, Stephen, I think it's a message that needs to be heard. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of this planet. My work on this film, it's a way to bring that message to a bigger audience, to get people to care about our oceans and what's happening to them." The audience murmured appreciatively. It was exactly the kind of passionate, sincere response they'd come to expect from one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. But Colbert wasn't satisfied with the straightforward answer. "Right, but let's dig deeper into that," the host said, his tone shifting slightly. "You've been pretty vocal about your activism over the years, and I respect that. But don't you think there's a certain irony in Hollywood, this town built on luxury and excess, when actors start lecturing audiences about environmental responsibility?" A flicker of confusion crossed Momoa's face. This wasn't the direction he'd been told the interview would take. His publicist, watching from the wings, tensed visibly. "I wouldn't call it lecturing," Momoa replied carefully. "I think when you're given a platform, you have a responsibility to be authentic about who you are. I'm not preaching to anyone, but I'm not going to hide my beliefs either. People can take what resonates with them and leave the rest." Colbert leaned forward, sensing an opening. "But here's what I find interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong. You've been pretty quiet about some of the more controversial political issues that your activist community has strong opinions on. Offshore drilling, carbon taxes, the role of government in regulating corporate pollution. Some might say that's having it both ways, claiming the moral authority of activism without taking the heat for the positions that come with it." The studio fell unusually quiet. This wasn't the playful back and forth that late-night audiences expected. Momoa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I think you might be misunderstanding something fundamental here, Stephen. My activism teaches me to love people, not to judge them. When I talk about values, I'm talking about protecting the water we all drink, the air we all breathe, and the home we all share. I'm not running for office, and I'm not asking anyone to live by my beliefs." But Colbert wasn't backing down. If anything, Momoa's measured response seemed to embolden him. "Come on, though. You can't tell me that when you're at an environmental rally, and I know you're a regular, that these issues don't come up, that your fellow activists don't have opinions about government regulations or corporate responsibility that you either agree with or you don't. The silence itself is a position, isn't it? The camera caught Momoa's expression changing. The warm media smile was gone, replaced by something harder, more guarded. Are you interviewing me about my film? Or are you trying to get me to take political positions so you can have a viral moment? A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. They could sense the shift in energy but weren't sure how to react. Colbert, however, seemed energized by the confrontation. I'm trying to have an honest conversation with someone who has influence in a platform. Look, I admire your work. I think you're a great actor. But when you talk about activism and values in interviews, when you make movies about protecting the planet, don't you think audiences deserve to know where you actually stand on the issues that matter? Momoa set his jaw, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The issues that matter to who? To you, to your audience, or to the millions of people who just want to see a good movie and maybe walk away feeling like the world isn't completely broken? To everyone, Colbert shot back. Look, we live in unprecedented times. Our planet is under attack. Our air and water are being polluted. When someone with your platform stays silent on these issues while claiming moral authority through activism, it raises questions. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Momoa's publicist had moved to the edge of the wings, her phone in hand, ready to intervene. The show's producers were exchanging worried glances in the control booth. Moral authority? Momoa's voice rose slightly for the first time. I never claimed moral authority over anyone. I share my experiences. I talk about what I believe in. And I try to make movies that mean something. But you're sitting here trying to force me into political boxes so you can what? Score points with your audience? Get a clip that goes viral on social media? Colbert's mask was slipping now, his carefully cultivated persona giving way to something more aggressive. I'm trying to hold you accountable for the influence you have. When you talk about activism and values but won't take a stand on the most important moral issues of our time, what message does that send? The message it sends, Momoa said, his voice now carrying an edge that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats, is that maybe, just maybe, a person's relationship with the planet and their understanding of right and wrong doesn't have to fit into your political categories. Maybe some of us believe that treating people with respect and dignity is more important than checking the right ideological boxes for late-night television hosts. The studio erupted in scattered, confused applause. Some audience members were clapping enthusiastically, others sat in stunned silence, and a few were clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken. Colbert's face flushed red. So you're saying that staying neutral on environmental and civil rights issues is treating people with respect? Momoa stood up abruptly, his composure finally cracking. I'm saying that ambushing a guest who came here in good faith to talk about their work, trying to force them into political positions they never agreed to discuss, and then lecturing them about moral responsibility is not treating people with respect. The audience gasped audibly. This was no longer an interview. It was a full-blown confrontation, and everyone in the studio could feel it spiraling out of control. Colbert, realizing he had pushed too far but unable to back down without losing face, doubled down on his aggressive approach. Sit down, Jason. We're having a conversation here. This is exactly the kind of deflection I'm talking about. When pressed on real issues, you're making this about me instead of addressing the substance. Momoa remained standing, his full 6'4" frame commanding the stage in a way that made Colbert look small behind his desk. The substance? The substance is that you invited me here under false pretenses. Your people told my team this was about the film. Instead, you're trying to turn me into your political punching bag. The host's voice took on a condescending tone that sent a chill through the studio. Oh, come on, you're a public figure worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You can handle a few tough questions, unless you're telling me that your activism only works when everyone's being nice to you. The low blow hit its mark. Momoa's eyes flashed with something dangerous. My activism? You want to talk about my activism? My activism taught me to fight for what's right, Stephen. But it also taught me that not everyone is worth fighting for. The insult landed like a physical blow. Colbert's face went from red to white, his jaw dropping open. The audience didn't know whether to gasp or applaud. Some were doing both. Did you just insult me on my own show? Colbert's voice was barely controlled, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped his index cards. Momoa's voice remained steady, but his words cut deep. I called it like I see it. You're sitting there safe behind your desk, trying to tear down a man's character for entertainment. What would you call that? The control room was in chaos. The executive producer was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but Colbert waved him off. He was too far in to stop now, his ego wounded and his judgment clouded by anger. I'll call it journalism, Colbert snapped. I'll call it holding powerful people accountable. You walk around Hollywood playing the moral authority, making movies about saving the planet while staying silent on the issues that actually affect people's lives. That's not activism. That's cowardice disguised as wisdom. The word cowardice hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Momoa took a step closer to the desk, his presence filling the stage. Cowardice? Let me tell you about cowardice, Stephen. Cowardice is hiding behind comedy when you want to attack someone. Cowardice is using your platform to ambush guests who can't fight back on equal terms. Cowardice is what you're doing right now. Several audience members were now openly uncomfortable, some standing as if ready to leave. The tension was suffocating, and the usual rhythms of television had completely broken down. Colbert stood up behind his desk trying to match Momoa's presence, but falling short. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm asking direct questions about your beliefs and your responsibility as a public figure. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Maybe I shouldn't, Momoa replied, his voice dangerously quiet. Maybe I should stick to working with professionals who understand the difference between an interview and an interrogation. The host's composure was cracking completely now. His voice rose to a near shout. Professional? You think ducking every important question while claiming moral superiority is professional? You think using your activism as a shield while refusing to take any real stands is professional? Momoa's response was like ice. I think treating a guest with basic human decency is professional. I think honoring the agreement that your staff made about what this interview would cover is professional. What you're doing isn't journalism, Stephen. It's a hit job with better lighting. The accusation of bad faith struck a nerve. Colbert's mask was completely off now, revealing something ugly underneath. A hit job? You came on my show. Nobody forced you to be here. If you can't handle real questions about real issues, then maybe you should stick to puff pieces on entertainment tonight. The contempt in his voice was palpable. Momoa stepped back not in retreat, but in disgust. Real questions? Is that what you call this? You've spent 15 minutes trying to trap me into political statements that have nothing to do with why I'm here. You've questioned my passion, my integrity, and my character, all while hiding behind the pretense of being some kind of crusading journalist. Colbert was spiraling now, his voice cracking with anger and humiliation. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm trying to get honest answers from someone who's made a career out of playing both sides. You want the respect that comes with being a moral voice, but you don't want to take the heat that comes with actually having positions. The studio had gone completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the heavy breathing of two men locked in verbal combat. Momoa looked around at the audience, many of whom were staring in shock, then back at Colbert with something approaching pity. You know what, Stephen? You're right about one thing. I do want respect, but the difference between us is that I try to earn it through my work, through how I treat people, through the example I set. You seem to think you can demand it while tearing others down. Colbert's voice was shaking now, his professionalism completely abandoned. Don't you dare lecture me about respect. You've been condescending to me since you walked out here, acting like you're above it all, like you're too good for real questions. Momoa shook his head slowly. The only thing I'm too good for is this ambush, this performance, this attempt to use me for your political theater. I came here to talk about a film that means something to me. Instead, you've turned it into whatever this is. The host was no longer thinking clearly, his responses becoming more erratic and desperate. This is accountability. This is what happens when you try to have it both ways. You can't claim to be a moral leader while staying silent on every issue that matters. Moral leader? Momoa's voice carried a mixture of incredulity and exhaustion. I never claimed to be anybody's leader. I'm an actor and an activist who happens to believe in a cleaner planet. But you've decided that's not enough. You've decided I need to be your perfect political puppet or your villain. Well, I'm neither. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both men's voices echoing through the stunned studio. Colbert, realizing he was losing control of his own show, made one final desperate attempt to regain the upper hand. Fine, walk away, prove my point. Show everyone what happens when someone with real questions corners you. Run back to your safe spaces and your softball interviews. Momoa paused at the verbal slap, his hand on the back of his chair. For a moment, it seemed like he might respond with equal venom. Instead, he straightened his shirt and looked directly into the camera. You know what? You're absolutely right, Stephen. I am going to walk away. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I respect myself too much to participate in this circus any longer. His voice was calm, measured, and somehow more devastating than any shout could have been. The camera operator, unsure of protocol, kept rolling as Momoa addressed the viewing audience directly. To anyone watching at home who came here tonight expecting to hear about a film that explores themes of ocean conservation and environmental responsibility, I apologize that you had to witness this instead. The movie opens this Friday, and I hope you'll judge it on its own merits. Colbert, realizing he was being completely upstaged, tried to interject. Oh, so now you're going to use my show to promote your movie after insulting me? Momoa turned back to him with a look that could freeze fire. I'm going to do what professionals do, Stephen. I'm going to honor my commitment to the people who worked on this film, even if you couldn't honor your commitment to conduct a respectful interview. The host was spiraling completely now, his voice cracking with frustration and embarrassment. Respectful? You've been condescending and self-righteous from the moment you sat down, acting like you're too pure for politics while the rest of us have to live in the real world. The real world? Momoa's composure finally showed a crack, his voice rising with controlled anger. The real world is where my family taught me to respect the land and the sea. The real world, it is where I learned that a man's word is his bond. The real world is where people treat each other with dignity, even when they disagree. This isn't the real world, Stephen. This is whatever alternate reality you've created, where ambushing guests passes for courage. The audience was completely silent now, some visibly uncomfortable, others leaning forward in fascination. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a complete breakdown of the unspoken contracts that govern television. Colbert, sensing he was losing the room entirely, made one last desperate play. Fine, leave, but don't expect to come crawling back when you need publicity for your next movie, and don't think this makes you some kind of hero for walking away from hard questions. Momoa stopped walking toward the exit and turned around slowly. The look on his face was one of genuine sadness, mixed with steely resolve. Hero, Stephen? I'm not trying to be a hero, I'm just trying to be a man. Something you might want to consider trying sometime. The insult landed with surgical precision. Colbert's face went through a series of expressions. Shock, rage, humiliation, before settling on something ugly and desperate. Get out! Just get out of my studio! Secret! But Momoa was already walking, his dignity intact, despite the chaos erupting around him. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused and turned back one final time, addressing the audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that this is not what I came here for tonight. I came to share something I'm proud of with people who might enjoy it. Instead, you gotta see what happens when television forgets its basic responsibility to treat people with respect. Colbert was now standing behind his desk, his face flushed and his hands shaking. "Don't you dare lecture my audience. They came here for honest conversation, not your sanctimonious—" "They came here to be entertained," Momoa cut him off, his voice carrying clearly through the studio. "And instead, they got to watch you tear down a guest for sport. I hope it was worth it." With that, he walked off the stage, leaving behind a studio in complete chaos. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or sit in stunned silence. Most chose the latter. Colbert stood alone on his stage, the full weight of what had just happened beginning to sink in. His producers were frantically signaling from the control booth, but he seemed frozen, unable to process the complete breakdown of his show. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he addressed the audience with a voice that lacked all of its usual confidence. "Well, that was unexpected. When we come back, we'll have our musical guest." But the damage was done. The studio audience, many of whom had paid good money and waited months for tickets, began filing out during the commercial break. They had come for entertainment and left feeling like they had witnessed something ugly and uncomfortable. Backstage, Momoa's team was waiting for him with coats and phones, already buzzing with calls from reporters and publicists. His longtime agent approached with concern etched on her face. "Jason, I'm so sorry about that. We had no idea he was planning to—" "It's not your fault," Momoa said simply, putting on his coat with the same dignity he had maintained throughout the ordeal. "Some people show you who they really are when the cameras are rolling. Tonight, we all learned something about Stephen Colbert." Meanwhile, on the set, Colbert was having a complete meltdown during the commercial break. "How did this happen?" he demanded of his producers. "How did we let him turn this around on me? He's the one who wouldn't answer simple questions." The executive producer, a seasoned television veteran, shook his head grimly. "Stephen, I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like that. You completely lost control of the interview." "I lost control?" "He's the one who stormed off after you called him a coward and questioned his integrity for 15 straight minutes," the producer replied bluntly. "This is going to be a nightmare to clean up." When the show returned from commercial, Colbert attempted to salvage what remained of the broadcast, but his usual charm and wit had abandoned him entirely. His monologue fell flat. His interaction with the musical guest was awkward and stilted, and the energy in the studio never recovered. By the time the show ended, clips of the confrontation were already spreading across social media. The hashtag #MomoaWalksOut began trending within hours, with millions of viewers sharing their reactions to the unprecedented television moment. The next morning brought a reckoning that Colbert had not anticipated. His show's ratings plummeted. Advertisers began expressing concerns, and public opinion had turned decisively against him. Think pieces appeared in major publications questioning his conduct and professionalism. Momoa, meanwhile, conducted himself with the same grace he had shown during the confrontation. When asked for comment by reporters, he simply said, "I wish Mr. Colbert well, and I hope he learns from this experience. As for me, I'm focused on my work and the people who support it." The film Momoa had come to promote opened to strong box office numbers and critical acclaim, with many reviewers noting the irony that a movie about environmental responsibility had been overshadowed by a talk show host's inability to extend basic courtesy to his guest. Within weeks, Colbert's ratings had dropped significantly, and industry insiders were questioning whether he could recover from the damage to his reputation. The confrontation had revealed something about his character that many viewers found deeply unappealing, and the backlash was swift and severe. In the end, the clash between Jason Momoa and Stephen Colbert became more than just a television moment. It became a defining example of the difference between authentic passion and performative outrage, between genuine principle and political grandstanding. One man had walked away with his integrity intact, while the other was left to face the consequences of his actions alone on his own stage.